Good morning and a very warm welcome. I think we are looking very good this morning. We are excited about this event. This is something that is close to our hearts and critically important to each one of us. The word sustainability, the meaning itself, it says it's about sustaining, otherwise there is nothing, right? So there is nothing that can be double-clicked or overstressed about this. This is something which is urgent. And issues around climate urgency is something that we are seeing left, right, and center. There have been catastrophes within our own country that we've witnessed, as well as outside. There are dramatic changes happening in climate, which has now put this whole issue to the forefront. I think this is something perhaps that we should have been addressing, and in some small ways were addressing for the last 2 or 3 decades, but now it's right in the forefront, and here we are. So good morning, my name is Upasna. I, on behalf of TIE Delhi-NCR, extend a really warm welcome to all of you here. Sustainability Summit is something that we started in 2020. There was a gap in between, but now we are back and we want and we plan to make it really large and big. With a huge support from the committee of the summit, which we will be talking about a little later, as well as our charter members, we've been able to put it all together. The idea is to begin this movement and to take it forward year after year, make it bigger, and make it more pertinent and relevant for startups to attend, because there is a lot happening here. Now, ever since this whole piece became so in our faces, I think it's become an integral part of larger companies as well as younger startups to keep it as a part of the whole business building thing. I was just talking to a founder a little while ago who said they built a company 10 years and then they are also now focusing on the sustainability part. But today there is an opportunity for startups, which they are picking up very eagerly, to build the sustainability aspect right from the beginning. So we are here today to discuss what is happening in the startups, in established companies, what are the trends, how are they looking at it, and what are the plans that they are putting together forward. We have some very special people here today with us. Through the day, you'll be witnessing these discussions that we've divided into various panels, and we'll be introducing them as we go along. But as of now, thank you very much for being here. Before we go forward, I would like to request you all to please be engaged. Do tag us on the social media at TIE Delhi. You can use the hashtag #StopTheDrop, which is the one that we've been using all along. I would request you to go ahead and tweet and sort of keep it engaged on the social media as well. And again, once again, before we go forward, I was again talking to somebody a while ago, all these programs that we as TIE put together, we're very thankful to our sponsors. We would like to thank session partners, Fig Bytes and Binary Semantics, session partners, Urja Energy, startup partners, Ecosperity Mobility, and we would like to thank Lufthansa Group for helping us put this together. I would now like to invite on stage charter member and a very special person here today, Anita George. Anita is the co-founder of Edhina Capital. She has a distinguished global track record in investments and sustainability. She's currently an independent director on the board of Tata Sons, First Solar, Piramal Enterprises, and she serves on the advisory council of International Solar Alliance. And is advisor to Berkeley Center of India Energy Transition Center and the Chandrakanta Kesavan Energy Policy Climate Solution Center at IIT Kanpur. She's got more than 2 decades of experience, and I think she is one of the pillars of what we are putting here together. Welcome, Anita.
Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to TIE and Delhi-NCR's Sustainability Summit. And I love what the tagline says, sustainability along with innovation. So today I have the absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Sudhakar Kesavan. No better person to launch this Sustainability Summit for us. He's been a pioneer in this field. He was chairman and CEO of ICF for over 20 years and built up ICF to be a global leader in energy, environment, health, and social programs, disaster management and digital transformation, and technology services. ICF has about 9,000 employees and will generate $2 billion of revenues in 2023. It operates from 70 offices across the globe, including 2 of them in India. The firm is publicly traded on NASDAQ and headquartered in the Washington area. It was also the first professional services firm and a real role model, and I give a lot of credit to Sudhakar for this, to go carbon neutral on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions in 2008, and this was acknowledged by the United Nations Environment Programme. Sudhakar has helped also the Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur, IIT Kanpur, to establish the Chandrakanta Kesavan Center for Energy Policy and Climate Solutions, which has been very key in terms of contributing towards shaping the young minds who are our future leaders. The center is named after Dr. Chandrakanta Kesavan, who pioneered the entry of Indian women in the fields of science and engineering. The center was made possible through a financial gift from Alka and Sudhakar Kesavan to IIT Kanpur. Mr. Kesavan has also helped to fund and establish a very exciting program between MIT and IIT Kanpur. It's the MIT IIT Kanpur Seed Fund to enable exchange of faculty and students between the 2 institutions through joint research projects. Mr. Kesavan graduated, as you might guess, from IIT Kanpur and has a degree in chemical engineering from there and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a master's degree from the Technology and Policy Program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is indeed my privilege to warmly welcome Sudhakar Kesavan here at the TiE Delhi-NCR Sustainability Summit 2023. Sudhakar.
Just click this, right? Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Anita, for that introduction. It indeed is a pleasure to be here. Let me just say that my experience is on sustainability is more focused on in the Western world, which perhaps needs to be more sustainable than it has been. And I have some knowledge of sustainability activities in India. And what I thought I would do is, I can't really tell you, I think you know most of what is happening on sustainability issues in India. I think India has been very aggressive and progressive on this front, at least from a policy perspective. So what I was thinking I will do when Upasana Sharma invited me for the summit, she said that it is dedicated to exploring innovative approaches, sharing best practices, and fostering discussions about sustainable solutions that drive positive environmental and social impacts. So I thought that after some preliminary comments, I would give you some examples of the activities which are actually happening on the ground in India, places which I have visited. Now, obviously, these are it's not a systematic survey. It is what I have seen and sort of empirical. But it gives me some sense of enthusiasm and optimism about the future, because I think that what is happening on the ground in India is actually quite amazing. And I will also talk about institutional development, therefore, as to how we can make this happen much more systematically going forward within India. So as you know, a sustainability strategy for India has to address the energy transition. India is the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and its energy sector is the largest contributor to its emissions. a sustainability strategy has to look at how we will transition to a low-carbon energy future, invest in renewables, energy efficiency, and energy storage, and also look at ways in which we can do this transition in a just way. I'm sure you've heard the expression just transitions. You can't have 2 million people working in coal mines and then say, geez, coal is not, we don't like coal, and therefore throw 2 million people out of jobs. So I think that how do you transition people away from jobs which are potentially not likely to stay? And we have enough time, and therefore how do we do that over a period of time? Sustainable agriculture is an important element. We need to look at, we are a major agricultural producer, India is. The agricultural sector is facing massive challenges, climate change, water scarcity. South Asia, including India, is a major water scarcity problem as climate change happens. And there's lots of soil degradation. And I think a sustainability strategy will have to promote sustainable agriculture, climate-smart agriculture, integrated pest management, as well as water conservation. So I think that's the other aspect. So energy transition, sustainable agriculture, and sustainable urbanization. Urbanization is happening at a very rapid rate. Cities are being built at a rapid rate. There are good examples here. Dwarka is the largest, from what I read, sub-city in the world, a new one. And I think that air pollution, traffic congestion, waste management are things which we need to deal with. And sustainable urban planning and development is another aspect which we need to focus on. Public transportation, green spaces, waste recycling, all things which I think we all know, but I think the point is how do we execute and make sure this happens? So just to repeat, energy transition, sustainable agriculture, sustainable urbanization, and finally social development. Obviously, there are lots of poor people, and the whole focus of policy is to get people out of poverty. And, investing in education, healthcare, et cetera, is an important element. The government has taken a lot of steps in promoting sustainability. I mean, there's a National Clean Energy Mission, National Green Hydrogen Mission, National Electric Vehicle Policy. So a number of things which have, from a policy perspective, the government has taken the lead on. And there's a National Action Plan on Climate, which has strategies to reduce greenhouse gases, renewables, deforestation, trees, planting trees, developing climate-resistant agriculture. So I think that India is taking all the right steps from a policy perspective, but I think what happens is that we have traditionally had a very strong policy perspective, but perhaps from an execution perspective, there is some more effort, and we need to sort of pay a little more attention to execution. So I think that that is the kind of thing which we need to pay attention to. And I will give you some examples here of companies I have been to. I have no financial interest in any of these companies, so just so you, from a conflict of interest perspective. And I think that the examples which I'll give you are an example of a net zero building, reforestation, and startups which are looking at sustainability and how to track sustainability targets. I saw a brochure on the table I was sitting at. There are companies which are doing that too. So there are lots of startups which basically look at that, and I thought I'd just give you an example which is happening right here. So if you get a chance to visit some of these institutions, it really gives you a sense of what's happening. So first one is Enpro. Whoops. Enpro is a company in Pune which does industrial fluids. And it's run by two IIT Bombay classmates, Sri Krishna Karkare and Alka Karkare, who met at IIT Bombay, got married, and then set up this business. And their son, Anuj Karkare, now is also helping them with the business. It's an extraordinary business. It supplies industrial fluids to companies worldwide. And they decided to build a building which is LEED Platinum certified. This is an extraordinary building. I mean, I don't think I've seen a building like this anywhere, even in the United States or any other European country. And the care and detail by which this building has been built is enormous. I can't give you all the different details of the building because it's really a pleasure to go visit it, and the amount of work which has gone into it is enormous. But I think that just to give you some sense of what the building has, it is LEED Platinum certified. It is a corporate headquarters of Enpro in Chinchwad, Pune. And It basically it's their headquarters building. They have a manufacturing facility which is elsewhere. And the building is run by, the company is run by these three folks. And it looks like this. It's just a pleasure to go to the building. It's completely sort of as efficient as it could be, and they're in the process of making it more efficient. And to give you some sense of what it is the planning on the HVAC systems, the architecture, the plumbing, the landscaping, the electrical works, even the lighting. They've taken into account even how the sun goes through and what shade they need to have and how much light comes in at any time, and therefore how much lighting load they need to keep the workplace lit. So the level of detail is extraordinary, and I think that visiting it and understanding what they do is really, this is just views of the building. And they have rooftop solar, as you can see here. They have energy-efficient appliances. They have evaporative cooling, meaning two-stage evaporative cooling, just evaporate water, and that cools the air, and they circulate the air in the building. They also have passive cooling strategies using earth heat exchange, and that they don't, you've heard of geothermal heat pumps, you've heard of all kinds of other sophisticated ways of doing it, but they've literally dug a trench on the ground, 6 or 8 feet down. They've put pipes through it, and they exchange heat with the ground because the ground is at constant temperature right through the year. And exchanging heat with the ground is enough to reduce the temperature to 26 degrees Celsius, which they then humidify and circulate within the building. So there's 10% of their building is air-conditioned, in that there are certain conference rooms, there are certain places which they thought they should air condition, just primarily because people would feel that the customers, et cetera, would feel that they should be air conditioned, and they did it. But the whole workplace is just earth air-cooled and evaporatively cooled. And I think that I only am focused on this specific aspect only because I thought it was just so extraordinary that they've thought through the geography of where the building is. They've looked at all the possible ways in which, looked at the climate, and it's built appropriately for the city and the town it is in, given the temperature profile in the city. So not everyone in India can do this, but I think everyone in India can look at ways in which they have approached the problem and perhaps design their building in that way. And I think that it's been, it really was so this is the evaporative cooling system which they have, which is moved using ceiling fans across the office. And if you go and visit it, you feel perfectly comfortable. There is no issue associated with the building, and you feel as if, and the workplace is full. Everyone's very comfortable, and it's very well lit. This is just, again, the earth air tunnel. If you can see, they literally dug a trench and put these pipes through and just pass air through it and just exchanges heat with the ground, which is at constant temperature, unlike the ambient situation where the temperature varies. So it's LEED certified. And they are in the process of getting net zero carbon emissions by 2025 and net paperless by 2025 too. And I have no doubt that they will get there. They also have enormous emphasis on sustainability. They encourage bike to work. They give a financial incentive to their employees if you bike to work. They have EV charging stations. They have all kinds of facilities for their employees in that building, which are all then, all the air quality, everything is taken care of by these sort of sustainable design systems. So it's an extraordinary building. And when I asked Shri Krishna Karkare for a presentation, he sent me an 80-page presentation of the building, which I couldn't share with you today, but I think it's a real example of what can be done if you really focus in on it. The next example I want to give you is about reforestation. So this 14 Trees Foundation was started by Praveen Bhagwat, who's an IIT Kanpur alumnus. Just to make sure that I'm fair, the first two are IIT Bombay, so I'm not partial on any, but this guy happens to be an IIT Kanpur guy and a good guy. And he has a PhD in computer science and built a company called Mojo Networks, which he sold, and then decided to embark on a career of planting trees and reforesting the Sahyadri Hills outside of Pune. The only reason I give you these two Pune examples is because they're fresh in my mind, and I just visited them in the last few months. And Pune does appear to be very progressive, given what I saw there. So it really is dedicated to building carbon sinks. So if I give you a sense, this was the land 50 years ago, about an hour away from Pune, forested green, and this is what it looks like now. There are little green patches which you can see in the middle, etc., but most of the ground is being deforested and is used for grazing of cattle, and then every year is burnt for it to sort of, again, rejuvenate itself in terms of just cattle feed. All the folks who live here participate in the milk cooperative. And what Praveen Bhagwat has found is that all this land is not needed for purposes of grazing. You can't have folks who live off the land not graze their cattle, but only 25% of the land, if it is well tended, is needed for grazing, and the rest of the land can be reforested. And he bought 4 acres of land initially on his own. It was completely barren, and over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, reforested it, and slowly has, through his efforts and through people looking at him, he's gotten voluntary donations of almost 1,200 acres of land, or he can now, 1,200 acres of land. And land, as you know, in India is a very sensitive topic, but he hasn't gotten ownership of land. He's just gotten the land, and they said, well, if you have the resources and if you can do it, please reforest our land too. And so he's in the process of reforesting the land and relying only on rainwater. So he doesn't pipe water from the river, which is not far away. And he decided that he's going to just collect the water, so harvest the rainwater, build ponds which can then sustain the land for the year before the next monsoon comes, and then hope that the monsoon fills up the ponds, and then he uses that water for irrigating the land going forward. So I think that what he has done is he has dug 84 ponds in the areas which he has gotten. Literally, there are certain places where he's blown up the rock. On the top of a hill, all the water flows down, so you can't really retain the water on top of the hill. So he has blown a hole in the rock, and he's got a rock pond where basically the water stays. And he's found that certain ponds are, stay for the year and certain others don't. So you have to do some water management associated with it. But I think what is important here is that he has taken farmers' land, roadside land, Gram Panchayat land, and 14 trees land, and is in the process of trying to rejuvenate the land. And if you look, this is the one on the right is the land which he gets, and then one on the left is what he's trying to do, growing trees and things. And given that he's a computer science guy, I went and planted a tree. You cannot go plant a tree there. And he geolocates the tree and gives you the coordinates of the tree. So when you go, say, 5 years later, you can go look at your tree and figure out exactly how it is doing. So it's one of these places where the data is preserved, and it's all data-driven, and he looks at all this stuff in a very sort of quantitative way, which will also allow him to draw lessons from it, which can then perhaps be replicated. So it's an extraordinary effort to create a carbon sink and reforest hills which have been deforested over the years, and in an area which requires it. And he's gotten grassroots support from the villages and the tribal folks who live there and sort of put together this piece of land, which is purely through grassroots efforts. So it's one of these things where it has not come down from on high. He has done it, and carbon sinks would be really essential. So when anyone wants to be carbon neutral, you will need to have some way by which you offset your emissions. You can't completely zero out your emissions, and one way to do that is to have carbon offsets using a carbon sink. And this is one way to develop these carbon sinks, because we have, according to him, 26% of our land in India is of this state. So there is enormous potential to do this, and if we can do it, then this can really make a huge difference. So that's the second example I wanted to give you. And let me end by a third example, which I'm sure there are lots of startups looking at ways in which you can track the data. And this is another one which somebody made a presentation to me, and I thought it was very interesting, because they're not only doing this for India, but they're also doing it for US and Europe, where they update themselves with the regulations, with the state of affairs in the regulatory scenario in each of the different countries in which they operate. And then they can help do sustainability planning. There's life cycle data which can be audited, and they can make sure that you can track how you're doing on setting up your SBTi targets and how you're working with them. So it's a good, solid platform for sustainability teams across the world, and certainly India. It's an Indian startup. So I'm sure there are many such startups, but I think I just wanted to demonstrate the variability of the enormous action happening. I mean, energy efficient buildings, which are really world class, a forestry project, which is really an extraordinary effort by someone who has really reinvented the way you do forestry. I mean, someone with a computer science PhD who goes and works the land to reforest the land, and therefore throw out all the models which potentially have existed with foresters and redo the whole thing and do it so successfully is an extraordinary sort of iconic way of doing reforestation. And then this platform on sustainability, which I thought was very clever and which did things in a simple, straightforward way, which they're in the process of implementing in Europe, US, and in India. So that's the sort of examples which I wanted to give you. I just wanted to also make a comment on, these are all things which are happening at an organic level in the country. So, there's great, someone, Mr. Karkare decides that he wants to do an energy efficient building, he does it. Praveen Bhagwat wants to do a reforestation project, he does it. Someone wants to do a startup on, but I think what we need is, given that we have 45 years till 2070 to get to net zero, how do you institutionally develop the curriculum to make sure that we have people who are trained to do this going forward? Because I think that engineering institutions everywhere in the world, and certainly in India, we're very focused on specific pure engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, chemical engineering, and the sciences, physics, chemistry, and math, and other biological sciences. And I think, how do you work in an interdisciplinary manner to make sure that you work with economists, sociologists, engineers, to work together to come up with solutions? And I think that institutional development element is important. And one of the reasons to set up the Chandrakanta Kesavan Center was to have and to set it in an engineering institution or technology-specific institution, is that the skills and the solutions will come using technology. But that technology has to be sensitive to the social milieu. And therefore, how do you make sure that you work with the policymakers and ensure that things are actually implemented? It's not enough to build a mousetrap, for an engineer to build a mousetrap and say, geez, everybody who's not using my mousetrap is not very clever or is a stupid person, they should actually use it. The idea is that you need to go out there and explain to them why the mousetrap should be used, why it will be helpful to you, why you will get re-elected if you use my mousetrap, because the people will like you that much more. So I think that closure of the language which an engineer speaks and which a policymaker speaks has to happen. And that bridge using interdisciplinary skills is the only way that's going to happen. So I think that setting up interdisciplinary institutions, so you take something like the IITs or the other engineering institutions we have, and make sure that they have forums by which the engineers work with humanities, with the liberal arts, with policy folks, with economists, etc., so that they can come up with solutions which are sensitive to the population, which is going to be affected by the implementation of the solution. And I think that closure of the gap, the language gap between the engineer and the policymaker has to happen in a deliberate way, and the engineers have to take the responsibility to make sure that they talk the language which the policymaker will understand. I mean, if you have a lawyer or a liberal arts person who's running the policy process, or there's a IAS person who's basically not a trained engineer, then you need to sort of have some understanding of what the pressures are which they work under, and therefore how can your solution basically help them. So I think that the institutional development aspect is really quite important, and the center is in the process of coming up with ways in which we can do this, and not only from an educational perspective, but also have folks working together. There's also a great emphasis in the engineering schools to set up, if you know, Stanford has set up they got $1.2 billion from John Durr, who's the venture capitalist, Kleiner Perkins, to set up the Stanford Durr School of Sustainability. So, and I think that I have read things that there are schools of sustainability being set up, and I'm hoping that that happens in the near future so that we can make sure that it's an institutional mechanism by which we produce people who are trained in an interdisciplinary way, who can go out into the field and make a difference. And I think that would be the way over the next 40 to 50 years that we basically make a real difference and systematically do things which are currently being done sort of in an organic way across the country. So with that, I think I will stop. The energy and enthusiasm I have seen in India on these issues is enormous. I was fortunate to attend a CSR summit in Aero City day before yesterday with some of the IIT Kanpur folks who are here, Ashish Garg, Professor Garg, and Kapil Kaul are here. And I think that the place was, I couldn't believe the number of people in that summit. I mean, the place was like run over. So obviously, CSR and sustainability is something which has taken a lot of mind share, and there's enormous energy behind it. And I'm very optimistic that things will happen in a way which is constructive and we'll be able to meet our goals. So thank you again for the invitation, and I appreciate the fact that you have listened so patiently. Thank you.
And I loved your examples and the fact that they are from India. So we have the opportunity for a few questions. Anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question, please just introduce yourself so that Sudhakar and I can know where you're from, and then ask your question very briefly. Thank you. Okay, so while people are warming up to ask a question, let me ask you one, Sudhakar. You know, there's a very active startup community here in India. TIE is one of the big supporters of that network. One of the lessons we learned from climate tech and 1.0 is that, you know, the market just in India was not enough. And a great development we are seeing is that a lot of the startups are looking globally for expanding their markets. So do you see the opportunity for Indian startups to go global? And do you have any advice for them?
I don't know about advice, but the example I gave you about that company Spree, they have decided to go, it's a very small company, but they've decided to go global only because of the fact that they think that they get a lot of credibility associated with the fact that they're being used by companies internationally. And I think that the market is very large. I mean, the ESG movement in the United States is very significant, despite the pushback which BlackRock and others have gotten. But I think that it is very real, and it's going to be very important going forward. And every company has to comply. When the Security and Exchange Commission says that this is the disclosure we want from you, a public company has to give that disclosure and be very clear that the data which they give is auditable, because the SEC can audit you. And unless you have mechanisms and methods by which you track the data, it's going to be very risky from a board perspective for you not to be absolutely certain that you have a basis on which you're producing the disclosure. So I think that for that example which I gave, and for some of the examples which I see on the, I think Fig Bytes and others have similar platforms, I think that that is something which is going to be very, very important going forward. And I think the larger ERP systems always say that they can do it, but they don't really do it with the same sophistication. So from an exit perspective, all those ERP systems are looking for which startup they have which is going to do a good job and then acquire you. So I think that it is really going to be important to, if you want to increase your visibility and be a serious player, I think being international is important, and also the market is very large.
Thank you. There's a question back there.
Hi, am I audible? Yeah. Yes. Hi, I'm Rameek from Hyderabad, India. So I'm totally with you in terms of momentum in the last few months on sustainability, CSR, ESG. We've been wanting to talk to corporates and we're going out to corporates as well for their green journey. So compliance is one part. How do we ensure that sustainability becomes an integral part of a corporate strategy? Because the leadership teams maybe are disconnected because they are chasing their P&Ls and their top lines and their market caps. So how does the movement in large corporates come into play as not only just compliance, but in terms of making sustainability an integral part of their strategy? This is something which I've seen in the last few months. This is being, I think, is a big gap between what the startups are doing today, because I see a lot of energy, passion, what they bring on the table, and there's a huge gap between the corporate leadership teams, which can actually support them and take it forward, not only in terms of supporting them financially, but in terms of giving them the infra. So how do we make this happen? Because I think the journey or the window of opportunity is very less. It's a few years. So how do we bridge this gap at a quicker space?
Yeah, this is it's an important question. I think that, let me give you my experience. I think that startups always have more energy than large companies. Large companies have certain bureaucracies, they work in certain ways. And I think that enforcement, I can give you in the US situation, which I'm more familiar with at the moment on this issue, I chair the board of a company called ABM Industries, which is got 100,000 employees, is 100-year-old company. And they pay a lot of attention to sustainability right now because all their investors, the institutional investors, starting with BlackRock, Vanguard, all these guys, are saying, what are you doing on this issue? So the only way these companies get pushed is if the shareholders start paying attention to what you're doing on this process. And once the shareholders start paying attention, then the companies start doing things. And once the companies start doing things, they're looking for startups to see, okay, which one will help me make sure that I meet this commitment? So some are more progressive than others. So some will move quicker. But I think the only advice I can give you is that you have to be relentless in pushing, have the staying power to stay there in front of their face. And in due course, the shareholders, at least in the US, are really pushing hard right now. And therefore, these startups, which potentially were sort of whistling in the wind, have suddenly got traction. It always takes longer than you think, and it always takes more time, but you have to have the staying power, and the companies will come around. The pace at which they change is very different.
Okay, we have one last question.
I just want to add what Sudhakar said. Like SEC, SEBI in India has very clear mandate. And picking up the second part of his question, people are not just looking at solving, but their business decisions. For example, I was talking to a leading bank. Their lending will not be to companies who are not sustainable. So exactly like SEC, SEBI has the guideline. And Sudhakar, you talk about company like Spree. A lot of their focus is on large Indian corporates. Because and interestingly, Spree has come out of 14 Tree Foundation. These are volunteers at 14 Trees from where they pull that out. So but only thing what I would suggest is, coming to his point, many times startups do not put laser sharp focus on taking the mousetrap to the market. So that is what I would say. Then there is enough market here in India also.
Thank you very much, Sudhakar. Once again, a big thank you to you. You've really kicked it off in a great way, and I'm sure the rest of the day will be even better. Thank you.